Speaker, I rise to commend the Honorable Winston Jordan, Minister of Finance, for presenting what will arguably go down in the annals of this Assembly as one of the most people-centered budget ever presented.
Yes.
Budget 2019. Mr. Speaker, this budget provides one of those rare moments when vision ably, if not exceptionally, meets fiscal management. Mr. Speaker, I wish to draw attention to pages 21 to 24 of this brilliant budget. The pages that deal with the Green State Development Strategy, Vision 2040. And Mr. Speaker, just so that we understand that a green state was not a figment of our imagination, let me take you back to the third stanza of our national anthem.
All right.
Which says, Greenland of Guyana,
Yes.
our heroes of yore, both bondsmen and free, lay their bones on your shore.
All right.
So this is not painting green, this is not Granger green, this is something that has been the aspiration of our people since 1966.
Embedded.
Mr. Speaker, before in fact, let me first of all commend this budget. And just in the event that I run out of time, let me say that I want to commend this budget to this House for its passing.
That's right. Said early, yes.
And I say so because of a number of reasons. But first of all, let me deal with some issues that arose from the other side. Mr. Speaker, there seems to be on the other side an underlying current which says that this no confidence motion that we file, we are afraid of it.
No.
And therefore, that has allowed for us to act in a certain way. But as Minister Ali said, 32 can never be more than 33.
That's right. That's right.
And therefore, all you're trying to do is spoil people Christmas. That's all you're trying to do. You're like the Grinch.
A solid 33.
You're like the Grinch. You want to steal Christmas. You want a budget. You want a debate before Christmas. And you know you're going to lose. You know you're going to lose. This is just pump. This is just fluff.
Nice pass.
Because you know at the end of the day, what matters is the vote.
That's
So first of all, Mr. Speaker,
you left.
I want to say that. That was the first underlying feature. The second one, Mr. Speaker, is this question about this cash grant. It's
Yes.
coming up all over in everybody's speech.
Yes.
This $10,000 cash grant. Mr. Speaker, the Hansard, dated Friday, 21st of August, 2015, records Minister Raphael Trotman as speaking to this matter. And it basically says that there was a subcommittee meeting of the cabinet in the PPP time in 2015.
Yes, we got a cabinet.
And the decision was made that to carry on with this cash grant was unsustainable.
That's right. Exactly.
So that in 2015, even before we came into office, it was stopped.
That's right.
It was stopped.
Yes.
So this question here now about bringing back cash grant, what are you asking for? Something that you stop yourself.
That's right.
You're taking this, what are you doing?
We have the cabinet.
So this is all that we have to offer there with respect to education in the face of a stellar performance by the Ministry of Education in managing the education sector of this country.
That's right.
So, Mr. Speaker, let the confidence vote come up. I like Minister Hastings' term, hashtag confidence
That's
in the
right.
government. I like that.
I love it.
Mr. Speaker, the third one has to do with the matter that was just raised by, I believe, the last speaker. She speaks about us not giving the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs the support which they require. And in the same breath, is bemoaning the fact that you have 2 ministers and several advisors.
Yeah.
What else do you want? If you are saying that you don't have the support, you must show me that I haven't given you ministers, I haven't given you advisors, I haven't given you the capacity to deal with these issues. But you don't make these noise and try to sound good, and then you leave. Yes? They are no wastes. They are honest, hard-working ministers. They don't create bogus titles and leave them and give the indigenous people bogus titles that are no good.
Bogus titles.
Take away, give and take away.
It is true. I've seen it. I've seen it, yes.
Evidence.
Mr. Speaker, the final statement I want to make with respect to my friends on the other side was that this is the first budget since 2015, since we're over here, that I've seen the opposition so disheveled.
Yeah, they're ready.
They're what people call you firing scattershots.
Yes.
Everybody coming up with their own thing. It's like if there is no central direction. There we all kinds of things. One man wants to take the budget back to select committee.
Yeah.
The other one, he don't want to say nothing about it. The time runs short, so he says nothing. And several positions that are taken over here, I can see no consistent pattern which says this is our proposal, this is our ideas about this budget. So what has happened is that the budget is so good, that you can't find anything. Everybody's screeching and searching and looking all over. Scattershots. But Mr. Speaker, I need to speak today about the Green State Development Strategy, because sometimes a vision is difficult for people who don't have 2020 sight to be able to see it. And so I believe I have to speak a little bit to that vision, and so that we can go back to now Green State Development Strategy, GSDS 101. We're going back to school. GSDS 101. First course at university. Mr. Speaker, the world is recognizing the threat posed by climate change, embarked on a multilateral international climate change policy. Listen, this is the background, this is history. This is the part you just lose, this is the part you get your fail on. Since 1988, with the establishment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in May 1992, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was adopted at the United Nations. On December 11, 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was adopted. This was the world's first greenhouse gas emission reduction treaty, and it was subsequently entered into force on February 16, 2005. On December 12, 2015, 195 nations adopted the historic Paris Agreement, which brought all nations into common cause based on this historic, current, and future responsibilities. As stated in the preamble, Mr. Speaker, of the Paris Agreement, climate change is a common concern for all humankind. It is, among other things, the direct result of human activities that are profoundly affecting our planet's ecosystem as well as the fundamental human rights of its people. Climate change undoubtedly represents one of the greatest threats to sustainable development. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in its Climate Change 2014 synthesis report, stated that surface temperature is projected to rise over the 21st century under all assessed emissions scenario. It is very likely that heat waves will occur more often and last longer, and that extreme precipitation events will become more intense and frequent in many regions. The oceans will continue to warm and acidify and cause global mean sea levels to rise. Mr. Speaker, I have posited the aforementioned to establish that it has long been concluded that our planet faces an existential peril in the form of climate change. It is therefore imperative that everything we do as a government, due to our geographic, demographic configuration that places Guyana among the low-lying coastal states, must be guided by this consideration in service of this supreme interest. Mr. Speaker, the Green State Development Strategy, Vision 2040, is best understood in that scenario.
Right.
Mr. Speaker, I will submit that the philosophical underpinning of the Budget 2019 is the Green State Development Strategy. The Green State Development Strategy, Vision 2040, is Guyana's 20-year national development policy that reflects the guiding vision and principles for the establishment of the Green State. Mr. Speaker, there are those who may want to submit that this is just another document, or it is simply a feasibility study. There are a lot of feasibility studies here today, or lack thereof, or even suggest that it is politically that it is politically platitudinous. Those voices find themselves at the opposite end of truth in light of the concrete, clear measures already taken and being taken by our government with regard to this vision. Minister, I commented that. Minister Don Hastings Williams has treated with the concrete measures in this regard that are in the 2019 budget, so I will not go much more into that. These measures, Mr. Speaker, rubbish any suggestion that the government is paying lip service to this issue. The government has already matched rhetoric on the Green State Development Strategy with solid action. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this vision is already actively moving from conception to policy to implementation at a rapidly developing pace. Mr. Speaker, the central objectives of the Green State Development Strategy, we getting into the meat, Honorable Member Ali. That's just the first bench in the class. The Green State Development Strategy is development that provides a better quality of life for all Guyanese based on the sustainable exploitation of our country's natural resources and the protection of our environment. It presents priorities for Guyana development that includes, but not limited to, 3 core areas. And I'll address those 3 core areas. First, sustainable management of our natural resources. Though too much mechanisms as such mechanism as the Sovereign Wealth Fund that will protect our prosperity and pave a pathway to long-term growth and sustained priority. The fund is envisaged to be in line with the Santiago Principles and Practices, which covers practices and principles in 3 key areas. 1, the legal framework, objectives and coordination with macroeconomic policies. 2, the institutional framework. This is the link. The institutional framework and the governance structures. And 3, the investment and the risk management framework. So that's the first core area. Mr. Speaker, the second core area, this is a disgusted student. The second core area is about
Clear the class.
supporting economic, environmental, and infrastructural resilience. Mr. Speaker, through the green and inclusive economic diversification, the transition to renewable energy, and the establishment of resilient infrastructure. In this regard, agricultural producers will be assisted to overcome persistent barriers and to switch to more lucrative and sustainable techniques such as organic farming, while expanding into processing and value-added activities. The GSDS will assess the case. That's all right. Mr. Speaker, I have to wake the student. It will assess the case for coordinated support schemes such as technology parks. B, improve the operating environment for businesses. And C, build resilient infrastructure, green towns, and urban and rural public spaces. The Green State Development Strategy is also expected to build greater economic resilience by diversifying production, reducing the country's dependence on fossil fuel, generating renewable energy, and emphasizing low-carbon manufacturing. If you haven't heard about all of these things already in the various presentations, you are sleeping. We'll come to the LCDS. What are you so bothered about? I will deal with the LCDS, my dear friend. Thirdly, building of human capital, Mr. Speaker, by promoting the development of a healthy, educated, and socially cohesive population. This will be achieved by diversifying and tailoring our health and education system to meet the expectations and developmental needs of our people, and to ensure that the health services and quality of education are improved across our regions. I think we've heard a lot about that. The health services improvement, the education services improvement, all across our countries. All Guyanese. You wish you could go there. You wish you could go there. Yeah. We're not going for diarrhea though. And Charter, no plane for that.
No medivac for diarrhea.
Mr. Speaker, it is envisaged that improvement in our education system will be achieved through the increased use of information and communication technology, particularly the use of smart classrooms throughout the country to connect students and teachers in hinterland and coastal locations, and to ensure that the quality of education delivery is the same across the nation. The Green State Development Strategy, Mr. Chairman, also proposes the sustainable management of land resources as a principal undertaking that will secure and safeguard our national patrimony for future generations from a land use planning perspective. The most important objective of this recommended national land policy is to articulate priorities as they relate to alternative uses of land and to define the criteria for determining best use. Mr. Speaker, the GSDS is a comprehensive document of strategic actions policies and programs to guide our development trajectory over the next 20 years. The object is broader than Guyana's forest development strategies and captures a more holistic view of social, economic, and environmental well-being, which is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Speaker, the Green State Development Strategy is built upon existing and prior national strategies, such as the National Development Strategy, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, the Low Carbon Development Strategy, the Social Cohesion Strategy, and the Cultural Policy, among others, the principles of which are still relevant today. Mr. Speaker, the Green State Development Strategy was developed from a multi-layered, wait now, have some patience, student. Mr. Speaker, you're anxious student. I'll mark you when I'm finished. Mr. Speaker, the Green State Development Strategy was developed from a multi-layered national stakeholder consultation process that began in 2017 and involved 1,700 participants from 200 communities across Guyana. Expert groups comprising 130 professionals from the public and private sector and civil society that were brought together by our strategy team met frequently from January to June of 2018 to determine the policies and priorities of the strategy. Mr. Speaker, the strategy team made 2 separate presentations to the Cabinet of Guyana and received the views of Cabinet. It is expected that by January of 2019, the strategy will be put in the public domain for further comment and review. The strategy will then be laid in the National Assembly, and we anticipate to have the entire process completed during 2019. Mr. Speaker, the Green State Development Strategy is a living document that will be subjected to continuous review at every point up to 2040. Mr. Speaker, this is what we call planning for now and the future.
That's right, yes.
Every Guyanese will have his or her say in this strategy, from the child in the classroom to the adult. The Guyanese people in the diaspora has been and will continue to be encouraged to give their input as well. Mr. Speaker, after all of this, this is what our Honorable Leader of the Opposition says. I will scrap the GSDS.
What? God. Oh.
I will scrap the GSDS. Well, of course, there's one precondition. And that precondition, of course, is that I don't believe the Honorable Leader of the Opposition did, in fact, read the CCJ's judgment on the third term application.
You didn't get a memo.
I don't know if maybe his honorable member, Mr. Nandalal, did not share the court decision with him. Because the honorable leader of the opposition is behaving and performing as if in the unlikely event of there being a change of government that he is going to be there. I don't know what is going on. Anyhow, Mr. Speaker, the honorable leader of the opposition basically has said in his documentation that he prefers the low carbon development strategy, which was introduced under his watch as an economic strategy which earned revenue. Then, of course, there's a constant refrain of my friend, the Honorable Mr. Irfan Ali, who says that there is no plan yet, of course, other than references to the low carbon development strategy. He himself cannot point to a plan by the former PPPC government. He himself cannot point to it. So he jumped straight over from the LCDS from Bar Jagdeo straight to now. So an entire administration is obliterated in the process, where he served as a minister. Now, Mr. Speaker,
I expected that from you.
Mr. Speaker, permit me please to examine this crazy plan by the leader of the opposition to scrap the Green State Development Strategy and to go back to his single source, low carbon development strategy. Single source, that's what I call it. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, immediately after this low carbon development strategy was launched, on May the 8th, on the 8th of June 2009, at the convention center, it was called at that time, it's now the Arthur Conference Center. There is a report that was produced by Red Monitor, dated 12th of June 2009, written by Chris Lang. And this is what he says about this low carbon development strategy at that time when it was just launched. First, he says, President Jagdeo has drawn up this low carbon development strategy without the benefit of a discussion within the country first. Without the benefit of a discussion within the country first. The Office of Climate Change will be close to his center of power within his own office. In fact, how can Guyanese citizens ensure that the president will be transparent and equitable in the implementation of the climate plans? A Red Secretariat has been established within the Guyana Forestry Commission, funded by Consultation International. 2 NGOs are represented on the country's Red Advisory Committee, and it goes on. Then it goes on to quote a Kaichor News article. Kaichor News interviewed Cabinet Secretary Roger Luncheon and reported that, and I quote, Amerindian communities in Guyana, which own 14% of the country's land, will not benefit from any special treatment in the consultations that will lead to the adoption of the government's low carbon development strategy. So here it was, the champion of Earth, here it was, he's launching this strategy, has not consulted with the Guyanese people. His cabinet secretary is saying that in the consultations which he asked for later on, a 3 months consultation which he asked for later on, does not have to consider the indigenous people. And my honorable friend, Ms. Pauline Sukai, you were there. And all the other champions of the indigenous people were there. I will come to the indigenous people's rights as well on this LCDS. I will come to that too. Mr. Speaker, questions remain about the reliability of the McKinsey calculation. Now this McKinsey group was actually employed to do these calculations about if you cut down all the forests, what it will cost you, and therefore put a price on that. And so everywhere President Jagdeo went, they were with him, all around the world, touring all over the world.
All the money
right?
spent.
All of that. And that is the consultation that was taking place overseas. The people here in Guyana, no consultation. And you're telling us about consultation now.
Yes. Gone out.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, the report speaks also about that without an independent procurement commission or procurement board to oversee and scrutinize government procurement procedures for externally funded construction contracts, red funders run the risk that their financing could end up in the pockets of the government's business cronies. This is what they said. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we are talking about what the LCDS is, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, The LCDS is a single source transaction.
Yes.
It is not a development strategy. It was a way of getting money from overseas to pay for the carbon credits that were here in Guyana. That was it. That was it. What we are talking now about is a broader policy that deals with all of Guyana, not just a transactional matter. This is what it was. It was transactional in nature. Mr. Speaker, but then let us deal with the other issues. Now, in an article titled APA FPP 2014, that is the Amerindian People's Association, Indigenous People's Rights, Forest and Climate Policies in Guyana. This is not a UK group, this is Jean LaRose. You know, UK group, Indigenous People and Low Carbon Development Policies in Guyana. What did the UK group write it for? What disrespect are you making?
All remember, you have 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. So that's why I said I endorsed the budget before.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the Indigenous people said that the key issues in the low carbon development strategy was that it is not ensuring effective participation and is failing to meet core safeguard indicators on Indigenous people's rights, including land rights, yet corrective action have still not been put in place. It says that the LCDS policies include a proposed opt-in procedure for Amerindian villages and confines respect for free, prior and informed consent to titled Amerindian lands and do not extend this core standard to untitled communities and customary lands, thereby violating Guyana's international obligations. There are several other recommendations that are here, which speaks to the way in which our Indigenous people were dissatisfied with the LCDS. So, Mr. Speaker, let me try to quickly wrap up and wish to reiterate that the outdated low carbon development strategy was premised on a single focus to procure international finance and has as its main focus hydrocarbon and hydroenergy. Mr. Speaker, Guyana now has a glorious opportunity to join the ranks of nations that have taken the green approach. And let me quickly identify two. There is an organization called the Partnership for Action on Green Economy page. Guyana is part of that organization. And two examples, one of Ghana and the other one of Peru. Countries that have the same kind of resources like us, but were in a bad state, and when they adopted this green state development approach, their GDPs rose significantly. And that was the case of Ghana, Mr. Speaker, and the case of Peru. So, Mr. Speaker, permit me also to allude to the fact that the green state development and the path to development for Guyana is ensuring that we join this movement throughout the establishment of the green state. If only we can set aside tribalism, racism, partisan interests, and political obstinacy, massive developments and sustainable prosperity awaits Guyana in a green state. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to submit that the Green State Development Strategy Vision 2040 is a superlative blueprint for the development of our country. And I invite the opposition to come on board to ensure that the economy is transformed, the people are empowered, and sustainable communities built so that all of our citizens can have that good life. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.